I'm Elizabeth Christensen, CleanFacts editor. Hard floor care has never been simple, but today it's more demanding than ever. Cleaning professionals are being asked to deliver consistent results across multiple surface types in more environments with fewer team members, tighter schedules, and higher expectations for appearance and hygiene. Today's conversation is designed to cut through all that noise. We'll take a practical look at where productivity breaks down in hard floor care, how various spaces present in different challenges, and what cleaning teams can do to improve consistency, protect finishes, and boost hygiene without adding labor or complexity. No small task here, right? Could you all do a short intro of yourselves for us?
Bill Griffin, cleaning consultants in Seattle, Washington. I do training, consulting. I also am involved in the SIMS program, Cleaning Industry Management Standard for the ISSA.
Bob Merck. I own a cleaning company and a training company. The cleaning company is Kettle Marine Cleaners. The training company is Mega, the Merck Educational Group and Associates. I've been training for over 25 years. I have been cleaning floors ever since I've been knee-high to a mop bucket. I worked for my mother growing up, and of course, now own a cleaning company. So have a lot of real-world out in the field experience, and I'm still in the field doing work as well.
I'm Taff Big, also known as Magic Taff. I have been doing this for 35 years now, and I built a few companies from scratch: carpet cleaning, upholstery cleaning, tile grout cleaning, pressure washing, restoration. And now I train people to start their business. And I have a really high success rate because there's systems that they follow that are proven. And I also own Magic Wand Company. It's a manufacturing company that also supplies equipment, chemicals, accessories.
Well, we can dive into the first question here. It seems like we've gathered together the great group of people to talk about this. Where does productivity break down most often in hard floor care today? You know, thinking of labor, equipment limitations, chemistry, scheduling, or unrealistic expectations. You know, we could just keep going on. And then, why? What's the breakdown here?
So I look at it as the industry kind of being in flux. There isn't anything that's not impacted or changing these days. The people, the surfaces, the chemicals, the expectations on the customers, the budgets, the robotics, AI, everything's just kind of in flux. And so if you're not staying on top of that and continue educating yourself as a manager or owner and training your employees to deal with the most recent surfaces and all these other things we're talking about, then you're going to be having some troubles, basically. And it just gets expensive. You can damage a floor real quickly by using the wrong processes. So I always say it's really important to find out what's the installation process for the flooring, what's the maintenance and care for it, and what's the warranty on the products. And get it from the manufacturer if you can to start with, because they're the ones that are going to stand behind it or decline your claim. So
I have a great passion for this topic. I talk a lot in my training about production killers because it's all about time is money, of course, and sometimes it's not hours, it's minutes that you save. I break down cleaning into three categories. You have your pre-cleaning, your cleaning, and your post-cleaning. And often overlooked is the pre-cleaning and the post-cleaning procedures that gobble up man hours that you are actually not productive. And so when we look at the pre-cleaning, for example, I made a list, and I don't know how much time you want to spend on this topic, but the biggest thing I tell all of my students is, you have to go out and look at the job, you have to inspect the job, and you have to also test clean the floor for cleanability and results. Test cleaning the floor is going to eliminate a million problems that we're going to talk about throughout the remainder of this conversation. I get constant phone calls from students that are having this problem or that problem. My first question is, did you test clean the floor? No, I did not. When you test clean the floor, you know what you're up against. You have a good idea what it's going to take to meet the customer's expectation, and the customer will have a realistic look at what the end result will be. So there's never none of this, I expected this or I expected that, because you've already determined that. So the first and foremost thing is to go out and do an inspection and test clean the floor. Now, if you'll indulge me for a few more minutes. Nick Palella, the founder of John Don, told me one time, he said, a sales presentation without a demonstration is nothing more than a conversation. And without showing the customer what you can do and learning what you're up against, you're just setting yourself up for failure. Now, Nick told me use the word, would you like a free demo? And I would ask customers, would you like a free demo? And they say, no, just give me the price. It wasn't until I changed the language and I started saying, in order for me to have a clear understanding of what we're up against, to give you an idea of clear expectations, and to help give you the best price possible, I need to test clean this floor. I've never had a customer say, oh, nah, don't worry about that. Usually, if they're serious about having the work done, they're going to allow me to do this test. Okay, so other production killers in the beginning of the job is to obtain all the pertinent information, such as entry issues. How are we getting in? Is there alarm code? Where are the lights? Where's the breaker box? Where's the water source? Are there security issues? And managing the indoor environment. Much of our work is done at night and on weekends. And if we're applying a coating or a finish or a sealer of some sort, and the indoor environment is not such that is conducive to rapid drying, you may be sitting on a floor that's taking forever for that finish to dry if the humidity. Remember, most commercial buildings shut down their air conditioning and the air handling system at nights and on weekends. You need that environment between 68 and 72 degrees for most floors to dry properly and for most finishes and sealers to dry. The moving of the contents, having a clear understanding of what you expect from your customer and what the customer expects from us. Are we moving the contents? Are you moving the contents? And what does that all entail? I've walked into jobs where the customer said, we got it all ready. We moved everything. They moved a few chairs and a couple of garbage cans. So you have to set that expectation. What are you moving? So that you can plan accordingly if you're the one expected to move it and you can get enough manpower in there and enough time. I only got a few more, please indulge me. I think this was critical. I've saved companies thousands of dollars a year with developing a prep and landing team. If you are going out to do a big job, a school, a healthcare facility where you need 6, 7, or 8 employees, there's no reason to have all of those people come to your shop. All of those people do not have to load the van and get everything ready for this assignment. When you bring them to your facility, you have to pay them from the time you get there. If you have a prep team, it only takes 1 or 2 people, 3 in some cases, to load the equipment, get there, have everything all set up, and then you assign the workers to show up at the appropriate time when you see is fit after you would have all that prep work done. They walk in, they jump on a machine, and they're going instantly. So for an example, I did work with one company. They had 6 guys come to the shop. It took them an hour to load and get to the job site. That's 6 man hours right there. And so 2 guys, that was 2 man hours. Also, by having people show up to the job when you properly plan for them to arrive, you can let them go when they need to go. If you have 6 people standing around and they can't go because Johnny's not done with his task and he's driving the van, or we only have 1 van, then you got people standing around doing nothing. When they're done, they can go. And another beautiful thing about that idea is they can now, you can hold them hostage, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Oh, you're done? Well, before you go, clean all the equipment, because all that equipment should be cleaned and ready for the next job at the end of each job. A production killer is taking it back to the shop and leaving it sit there, and the next time you need it, it's all gunked up, and you got to clean it before you go. Organizing and managing and assigning crew members to their task is important. Don't leave it up to the crews. Everybody has their area of expertise, and this guy may be better at that, or this guy may be better at this. So you want to assign the task to the person in which is best suited for that task. And of course, establish the flow of work. You as the manager should understand, we're starting over here, we're going to end over here, or do we need to do certain areas first? In the grocery store world, you might have to do the produce area because they come in very early. You might have to do in front of the cash registers in areas that receive excessive high traffic. So that all of those, what I like to call 3 cleaning procedures, if not done and done right, They are the hugest production killer that I know of. And I could get into the rest, but I just wanted to drive this point home about the pre-cleaning procedures and how essential they are to increasing productivity. Because at the end of the day, when you look at how many man hours it took you to do the job, and then you divide that by what you make, you go like, wow, I hardly made any money. Well, if I could have eliminated 6, 7, 10 man hours on the job, I might have broke even.
I can't beat that. I can talk about some basic things,
Okay.
not the details that Bob went into. Maybe for the viewers who are not that advanced yet. I think number one is labor. Labor is always the problem. And a lot of the times they don't work, and a lot of the times it's us because we don't train them correctly. When we don't train them correctly, what happens is they become a liability. And we're just like Bob said, the labor setting up and all that, that takes time and money. And then having 6'4" guys on the clock, it's a problem. And then the other thing is the equipment. Equipment breakdown. I've been to so many places where they have so much equipment that they're not even using. I went to a convention center for a training one time, and they literally had 15 machines just sitting there, broken down or never being used. And they were buying another machine from me, which really didn't even make sense. So there's that. And then what happens is if the machine breaks, they just leave it. They just leave it. And then they'll use whatever. There's low production machines that will just kill their time, and that costs you money. And then the chemistry. Chemistry is another thing that's a problem. Chemistry is often ignored. Chemistry really cuts your cost down quite a bit if you have the correct chemistry. And the cleaning time will be reflected in that because the chemistry is going to do the work. But the problem is that people don't really understand it that much. They're almost afraid of it. I recently went to Newark Airport and they are using ready-to-use pre-spray. I mean, in this day and age, ready-to-use pre-spray comes in a 5-gallon thing, and it doesn't really even quite work as well as some of the ones that we have here. But besides that, it doesn't have the grease cutting power. It doesn't have the oxygen, to remove the organic stains. Just there's so many things. That's not environmentally good. It doesn't say anything about the environment. It's not approved by the Carpet and Rug Institute. There's just so many little details. And then Bob already covered this one really good, was the scheduling is another one of my things. The infrequent maintenance. When you do it infrequently, then every time you do it, it's a big project. So a little bit here and there touch up, like that airport example I gave you. I set them up with 2 machines, OP machines, oscillating pad machines, and they literally run 24 hours a day. And those machines are used for touch up. But what that does is when they do a full extraction, then it isn't as bad. And a lot of those spots and stains that they remove like that with the machines that are working 24 hours, they're going to be easier to get out because it's already been kind of picked up. And then last thing is the expectations. You gotta teach people the expectations. You gotta have the tools. You gotta have the processes. For example, systems that are written on a piece of paper, something that you can enforce. And then it gives them the ability not to forget a lot of the things that are important. And then, it just makes us look good too.
And Taff and Bob kind of started touching on this topic, but different environments. How do different environments such as healthcare, education, retail, industrial, office spaces, I could just go on and on, it changes the way crews approach hard floor care and which spaces consistently create the biggest challenges. Bill, you want to start? Yeah.
I guess I'd like to touch on that one a little bit. It's important to do the research to know exactly what the reason is you should do in the cleaning and what the restrictions are in the situations. Like you're correct. Schools, you got kids around there all day long and sometimes into the evening. Sometimes some of these buildings are open 24 hours. And then again, if you're doing hospitals, infection control, and even infection control in all the facilities these days, from COVID, we kind of learned that, we have to marry hospital cleaning into all of our facilities because you can get sick anywhere. And there's cross contamination issues everywhere. And then again, and it just goes on, it could be a grain elevator, situation is different. It could be a research lab, it could be a nuclear power plant, it could be an educational facility, it could be homes. There's no end to the type of specialties that you need to kind of be aware of so that you don't make mistakes and do the wrong processes or contaminate things in the process. So doing that front end research and what we call due diligence, like Bob said, going out and inspecting and taking a look and doing a test, those are all excellent concepts to prevent problems in the future, especially when you're dealing with something different. And just even the floor coverings, everybody goes, well, how do I make that shine? Well, put some floor finish on it. Well, that's fine. It'll give you a shine, but taking that floor finish off may destroy the floor. So, understanding before you start what the limitations are and what the requirements are an important part of the job as a professional. And it comes from what Taff was talking about, is training and certification. If you don't get the proper training, if your managers aren't trained, if your supervisors aren't trained, even your customers need to be trained as to what the true expectations are and what you can do. Oh, we're going to make it look like new. I don't see any manufacturers on this meeting here today. We don't make new floors. We restore floors and clean them up and sometimes repair them, but we don't make floors. So telling somebody you're going to make it new is not a good thing to say. Do the best you can and be honest with your customers, and then get the job done in an efficient way at a reasonable price, and then they'll probably call you back or keep you.
I'm going to bounce off something Taff said. First of all, a couple of things my mother always used to say, there's two types of cleaning. There's keep up and there's catch up. What do you think is less expensive, right? Keep up. And then she always used to say, and this kind of bounces off what Bill said, under promise and over deliver. And so I thought those were nice things. As it relates to the environments you're speaking of, the healthcare and the education, schools and whatnot, my best advice for eliminating production killers is try to work when there's nobody around. Now that's easier said than done, but that may mean a weekend, maybe a Sunday, maybe late into the evening. But if you can always get in there when there's nobody around, first of all, you don't have people watching over you, making you nervous. Secondly, you're going to increase your productivity because you're not working around people. Now, that, like I said, is easier said than done. If you're going to be in environments that are occupied, you may want to consider using low odor products, such as low odor floor strippers and things like that contain less odor, so they're not as offensive to the people that are in there. People that do restoration work and also do floor work oftentimes literally bring in their air scrubbers to clean that air as they're doing the job to eliminate that. Also using air movement, not so much, we could go into a whole conversation about drying the floor and the finishes and the sealers, but to push the air in the opposite direction from the occupants, maybe outside or maybe just in a simple direction where nobody's going to be forced to breathe those odors. So pushing those odors away could be of a benefit. And then again, like I said, working when nobody's around, I think is a really big thing. And it could be you have to work on a holiday as well. So you have to make those decisions, but working when nobody's around is probably my best advice.
So let's just talk about the healthcare first, because that's the most challenging. Because you got the infection control, you got the fast drying, no margin for error. You're going to get into trouble. You're going to lose this stuff. You're going to lose your contract. Then the education, heavy traffic areas, mixed floors, limited budgets. So in schools, there's different challenges. There's carpet in the hallways where the lockers are. And then in the rooms, they may have VCT. In the gym, they may have wood floors. So there's a lot of different things. And then the limited budget, that destroys everything. They say, oh, we don't have money or we didn't get funded or whatever. So you have to deal with that differently. Maybe you need to come up with a money saving plan for them, be able to get the business. And then the retail is kind of, again, like the evening thing that Bob was talking about. You wouldn't do it in the daytime. You probably do it in the evening. It just disrupts it. And then the time you have to hire people for the evening. And then the industrial is like the grease, the dust, forklifts. stuff like that. It's just totally different. The forklift drips oil like mine is. There's all kinds of stuff that is different. Like in my building, it's going to be totally different than a retail place, even though it's kind of retail too. And then offices, people, a lot of customers actually do the offices more than anything because there are all kinds of offices. But in general, they're executive offices that we're referring to. So where people are sitting down, they have lighter soil because by the time they get to their rooms, the soil has already been, it's like in the entry mat, for example, in the hallways, elevators too. Um, there's tight spaces. Sometimes it's hard to work around their desks. You got to worry about, am I going to spill this or is it going to drop on my, oh, I'm just kidding. Is it going to drop on my keyboard? There's a lot of that stuff. So consistency matters. But I think healthcare is by far, I don't know if the guys agree with me, but I think it's really the toughest and the hardest and the most challenging for us.
I would agree with that. I'll bounce off of something Tab said too. Retail. A lot of the retail stores may not open until 10, and later. And so once in a while, if you have a more of a day crew once in a while, they can get in there as early as 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and get their work done and not have to go at 10 o'clock at night when they close. So if it can work out in some of these environments, particularly retail and restaurants are another classic. If they're closed one day out of the week, that's the day you're going to get in there. But sometimes really early in the morning is another option.
That's a good tip. And
Thank you.
Taft touched on this as well, but inconsistent results remain a top frustration for floor care techs. What are the most common causes of inconsistency, and how can cleaning professionals control or even eliminate them?
Just again, being aware of the needs. One of the concepts that Bob's pointed out there was to go out and inspect the site. If you can't go, the next best thing we do is FaceTime with them and take a look around, at least that way, and get some questions answered. But it's always best to go and walk the site and gather the information in person and to have a discussion with the customer, because then you can see things and get answers out of people and really understand what their expectations are. And getting success in these jobs is really finding out what the expectations, requirements are, and then meeting those or exceeding those. And I would just one last thing, not to disagree with everybody, but I think one of the toughest cleanest to clean is the clean room environments where they're measuring the particle count, with a meter, and where you're fully gowned and might be breathing air from a tube, and that nothing can go in or can go out, And again, if you screw up, you might shut down a line that generates millions of dollars worth of drugs a day. And if you screw up and they don't catch it, you may kill a few million people in the process too. So those are extremely touchy. And it's not that we don't do those. We do those too. They're out there. There's many of them. And there's also the high technology ones where they're building computer chips where that cleaning is really important as well. And it's getting more and more important, actually. We're seeing a transition from some of that technology moving over into other areas because it's better to prevent the cleaning problem than to have to solve the cleaning problem. So.
Okay, Bill, you got us on that one. The
Yeah.
clean room scenario. That is so true. I actually do a couple of clean rooms in the computer world. And we have to go through a blower process just to get Tyvek suits and the whole bit. In fact, every one of our people having to be background checked by the FBI because it's a very sensitive facility. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
All kinds of technology there to be aware of. Even those places getting water on the floor. Some places they go, oh, you can't put water on the floor, so you got to be sucking up the water or light moisture because it'll get down between the floors and cause problems with where it sits on the grids. So all kinds of technology. Yeah, and under the floor too. So Bob's right. No end to it.
In relationship to the inconsistency, I have to go back to my test cleaning because I show them what the end result will be. And when I do my test cleaning, people go, when I talk to my students, it's like, well, doesn't that take a lot of time? Doesn't that take a lot of time? Yeah, it does. But it saves so much headaches and you make so much more money on the back end of this in conjunction with all of those other things I spoke about. But your crew as well will have a clear expectation. Oftentimes your crew's going to be out there and they go, I can't get this any cleaner. And they don't know what the end result will be. So they're getting frustrated. And so it also helps your crew as well as your customer. And again, I go back and I think on my note I said I never get inconsistent results because every floor job is tested. And I think once you can do that, you're going to know
Mm.
what the end result will be. And I'll share a story. I went out and did a natural stone just recently, and I didn't get mural-like results as her neighbor had gotten. And she's like, "Well, Bob, why not?" And my test determined that's all I'm going to get out of the floor. I said, "You have a natural stone, and this is all it's going to give us. There's probably maybe some dolomite, heavier dolomite in there." And I started throwing mineral names. Oh, the magnesium, the dolomite, and all of the levels of that isn't what your neighbor is. But I had some answers for them. And there's a lot of truth to the minerals in natural stone. We don't need to get into that, but I wasn't able to give her what she in her mind's eye had. So sometimes the inconsistency is age, condition, and the type of floor. That's all that floor is going to give you.
I want to
Very
make a
good.
tip here. I give a little tip before we go on. One of the things I think from a predictivity standpoint that we make many times is we bring all this equipment in, a big floor machine, a vacuum cleaner, a truck mount, whatever it is. I like to go with a little hand 8-inch or 7-inch rotary machine that's handheld, and you can change the pads out and just do a small test area. I always try to do the smallest test area possible. When we say test a floor, well, I'll just do this room. If you can't get 3 inches clean, you can't get 30 feet clean. If you can't get 3 inches and 30 feet clean, you can't get 30,000 feet clean. So unless you get your process, your procedure, and the results you want first identified, you shouldn't be going forward at all.
Thank you, Bill. And I appreciate you making that clarification. I don't go in and do a test cleaning with the full-blown big equipment. I've got a small handheld
Yeah.
variable speed grinder with a
Yep.
3-inch and a 7-inch drive, and I'm doing 1 square foot. Now I may do 1 square foot along the edge of the room
Mhm.
versus this high traffic area to kind of see what I'm dealing with, but they're
Good.
very small areas. And then one other thing that brought to mind was if you cannot get in there, and like Bill had said, well, maybe we'll do a FaceTime and you'll show me the floors via the video or whatever. Well, even when I cannot, and I'd be lying to you if I told you I got into every job. Sometimes you just can't. We're actually doing one today where they're moving into this new building. The guy's coming from out of state to meet us there, and we did not have access to that building until today. We're going to do in the cleaning. Well, the very first thing we do is we have one guy's doing all the dry soil removal while the other technician is doing the test cleaning to show the customer what they can expect. So even though you can't get in there prior to, the very first area you do is your test. And if you are not 100% comfortable with that, or you can bring that customer in there and say, "This is what I think we're going to get, what it's going to look like. Are you happy with this?"
Mhm.
So there's ways of getting around that as well. I digress.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree. Like I think Bob Costa said that inspect to know what to expect. That kind of sums it up, at least what you guys are saying. But if it's my turn, I can speak. But that was just a
Yes.
comment box. Okay. So basically, again, I try to keep it simple for the guys who are maybe not that advanced. No standardized process is by far the biggest problem. A checklist, a simple checklist can solve that. A simple checklist. They don't do it, and then they don't enforce it. They don't give them any repercussions when they don't use it. And then the next thing is the dwell time and the chemicals that they use. They got to use the right chemicals. They got to be diluted correctly. If the dilution isn't right, then one guy is going to clean a little different than the other guy. And then the worn pad. I've gone in there and people are using machines with just trash. Actually, this happened recently where they cleaned something and everything wicked up later because the pads, instead of being dry or kind of wet a little bit, they were just soaking wet. So they cleaned it and everything looked beautiful, and then the whole thing wicked up. So that's inconsistent results. One guy does it correctly, the other guy doesn't do it correctly.
Really good points,
And
Tim.
and then again, like in Bob's area, my area, not Bill's area, we have different weather, different challenges, and the weather brings salt, snow. There's in the summertime, our humidity is extremely high, so we have to deal with that. And then again, the last thing I think would be just the employees, the rush jobs.
Boy, I tell you, you guys bring up some awesome stuff. Taff, you're right on. I'm going to start with that rush job, by the way. When you tell your technicians, and another thing for this test, by the way, you have an idea, and every company should develop their own production rates. How long does it take to do this job? And when you assign a crew to a job and you say, hey, you're going to be done by midnight, and all of a sudden it takes until 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, let me tell you, your technicians have checked out at midnight. The quality of their work starts slipping dramatically. They start rushing. They don't care. You said it'd be done at midnight, and I'm still not home yet. So having a realistic expectations of how long the job will take, and then pad that by a couple of hours. If I tell somebody we're going to be done at 4 o'clock in the morning and let them go at 2, they think I'm a hero. So you have to always keep your employees, as Taff was saying, in mind when doing these jobs, because your employees can be some of your biggest production killers. The checklist, phenomenal. I should have mentioned that as well. We not only have a checklist in the shop, but we have a checklist on the back door of all the vans so that everything we brought into the job comes out of the job. And who's stuck loading the van? Sometimes the low man on the totem pole or the new guy. He doesn't know everything that we have into that job. They're on laminated sheets of paper with a wax pencil that they can just check off. Now, I have veterans that don't even use the checklist. They just load it. But if they forget something, I can then hold them accountable. If your truck is neat and organized and you can glance in it in the back and you say, boom, everything's where it's supposed to be, then again, that saves a lot of time and effort. And then the last thing I'll say is we have red tags in our vehicle. If a piece of equipment would fail on the job, you tag it when you put it back in the van. That way, when it comes back and whoever is taking care of that van sees, oh, I got to repair a piece of equipment. We went out and did a job one night and the piece of equipment broke. I was training a new guy the next day. I came in at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was. 3 o'clock, I go out to train this guy. The machine doesn't work. Called up the technician. I said, Jesse, what happened to the machine? Oh, I think the switch went out on it. I had all day to repair it, but I didn't know it. That's when we started putting tags on the equipment.
Right.
I looked in the back of his van. It was neat and organized. Red tag. Oh, what's wrong? Jesse got done at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to call him to say, hey, is everything okay? I could just read his tag, repair the equipment, and then I didn't look like the doofus when I went to train a new guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't
Yes.
agree more.
Simple communication silently. It's great. Yeah. And Taff touched on this too. We're coming out of this salt season. I don't know if there's just one salt season anymore, but floors have taken such a beating. And what are some quick tips you might offer crews dealing with this?
What's that? We should let these cold guys go, because we only have water here.
Yeah.
But I
Okay.
would add I want to add a couple of points though, since we got
Okay.
there was, Bob, his point about the watching that. I don't want to give people blank checks either. I want to set the expectation before I send the work out. This should be done by the midnight. And if there's some problem at 10 o'clock, you need to call me and let me know why we're not going to meet the standard or the expectation. If you just say, hey, go out and take care of that job and we'll see you later, then that's what's going to happen. They're going to spend their 8 hours out there in most cases. So I don't give people blank checks. I tell them what the expectation is, and I base that on the facts from what we've done the work before, and I keep accurate records so I know what a job should take or how many square feet they should get for a certain type of job. And then again, set the standard. Hey, listen, if you got a problem at 10 o'clock here, I want to know about it, and I'll come out or I'll give you some advice or I'll take a look or do whatever I have to. But I don't want to find out in the morning they were there till 5 in the morning. And it costs, we didn't make any money on the job then. So not giving out blank checks is an important part of it. No, I don't know if you want to think about this one, but I also think it's important to talk about the safety, the slip and the fall issues and proper footwear and proper clothing and these issues too. You've got big storms with snow right now. Do you have emergency things in your truck, coats and gloves and boots and radios so that people, if they get stuck or have a problem, they can do something about it and not freeze to death out there on the road or get out and walk and get frostbite. So being aware and protecting our employees is an important part of our job as well. And getting the concept so that everybody's looking out for everybody else, because there isn't any job that you do that you couldn't get hurt. and it can be dangerous if you do it wrong. And so getting people to understand what the risks and the hazards are is an important part of it. So they see it, not because they can't. The manager and the owner can't be on everybody's shoulder all the time to warn these things. They've got to learn to see these things themselves and remember they're the one that's going to lose the arm or the hand or the family, and we're going to get the fine, but they're going to lose the body part and maybe never work again. So just touching on the
Right.
safety aspect of it.
So this ice melt thing drives me crazy because there are so many different types of ice melts out there,
Right.
and there are different pH of each different ice melt. And so, and then also certain ice melts will react differently with the snow. In the rock salt, with a combination of the snow, will actually start to drop the pH of that ice melt. Now, if you have a concrete surface, that ice melt might start to damage that surface because of the acidity. If I'm in a lobby of a bank that has marble floors, well, acidic products would hurt that material. So you can't use, everybody always says, oh, use vinegar and water to remove the ice melt. That's an old saying. Acidic products may be the one to use. But here again, alkaline will also work, provided the alkalinity is higher than the pH of the salt residue. The highest salt residue that I know, and Bill, you might know a little bit more about this, is about 11 on the pH. So sometimes if you want to clean with the alkaline side, you got to get pretty high. But most of your ice melts are between that 5 and 9, you know. And so usually either high alkaline or slightly acidic products, and you would have to test to determine which one works the best. But you also have to know what surfaces could be damaged by either high alkaline or an acidic product. Most of your surfaces will not be damaged by alkaline, but many surfaces can be damaged by acidic products. So check with your customer, find out what type of an ice melt he is using, and then go from there.
And I would just add to that, prevention really is the best route here, using entry matting and walk-off mats and increasing your maintenance frequency of procedures. If you do the basic simple stuff, the harder stuff and the bigger stuff gets spread out farther. So prevention is always better than cleaning. I think Michael Berry was one that said that the answer to cleaning is not cleaning. The answer to cleaning is prevention. You don't make a mess, and you can prevent the mess from getting around. And I always use a little example, that if you do a lot more maintenance in the first 25 feet of the building, you can pick it up with a shovel. There's so much dirt there. But if you let it get tracked throughout the building, then you got to use tweezers to chase it down. So just the concept of prevention is critical.
Yeah, that matting cannot be underestimated. It's just phenomenal, the amount of dry soil. And a proper mat, an outdoor mat that's a scraper mat that'll knock off the big chunks, and an interior mat that'll take care of the small, fine particulate matter and the moisture. And they need to be changed and rotated regularly. Otherwise, we went and picked up a mat from a facility, and the guy said, "Can you clean these at your shop?" We cleaned them, brought them back. He said, "You brought me the wrong mats." I go, "No, those are your mats," because my mats were brown and they were green when we returned them because there was so much crud in those mats. They never changed them. They never rotated them. They never cleaned them. Once a mat fills up, all you're doing is tracking soil into the building.
And some, like in Seattle where it rains all the time, you might change them out several times a day. You have extra sets of mats, just a foot longer. Instead of 10 feet or 20 feet, you got 30 or 40 feet. And then you change them out a couple times a day, and you actually do some cleaning on them during the day because they just get loaded up. Otherwise, like Bob, I always compare it to, like, if you don't clean them and take care of them, they're not really a receptacle. They become a toilet, and then you're walking through it and tracking that throughout the building instead of getting it collected there. And they're made to hold soil.
Yeah.
They do a good job of that.
It takes about 6 to 8 steps to clean the bottom of your feet. Most people put the matting the long way, the crosswise instead of the long way.
Get one step.
Yeah, they get one step.
Foot on the mat. I got matting. Not the right kind, not the right place.
Yeah, and Gary Clipperton, in that one study he did, showed that dry soil and improper matting can be tracked in upwards of 50 feet into the building.
Well, I'd say it goes everywhere.
It
just
does.
the farther you go away, you got less of it. But that's why I say the focus needs to be the first 25 or 50 feet, as well as the outside of the door, too, your parking lot and your steps and your sidewalk and the gravel, whatever you got outside. Whatever's outside is going to come inside. So do what you can to prevent it from getting in.
Sorry for being long-winded, but Bill made me think. We work with a landscaper that cleans the parking lots and the sidewalks of our janitorial accounts after winter to get, because they mix a lot of their ice melt with sand, and that just gets tracked in. And so by getting those areas cleaned up, it's less tracking in. And don't forget the employee entrances as well. We always think of the main entrances, but those employee entrances, sometimes you have more employees coming into the building than you do people from visiting the building.
As well as the boss might come in the back door too, So the loading docks. I always thought Bob's point is very valid. I always thought, you've got injury mats in the front, then I go to the back of the hospital or the back of the school to the loading dock, and all the crap's coming in there. There's no mats at all in the back, and that's where really all the heavy traffic comes in, and the gravel parking lot, and all those things. So all those areas have to be inspected. And then another one too that's kind of interesting too is areas where you actually generate soil in a facility. You got moisture and water getting tracked out of the bathrooms. You got coffee machines dropping things on the floor. You might have some assembly, like when I worked at Boeing. They were building the airplanes out in the back, and engineering was in the front. And for that 50 feet of carpet was just getting trashed because all that oil and metal shavings was getting tracked onto the floors and onto the carpets, and very hard to get off. So more matting and cleaning out those areas too. Every area needs to be cleaned. If you don't clean it, it's just going to get tracked around and make a bigger mess and damage the surfaces. And maybe a health issue too, not just an issue of appearance or wear, but a health issue to the people who are working in those areas becomes a problem too. We don't recognize it, and they may not even see it.
No, they don't. We're not going to let Taft talk now.
Okay.
Well, I think you guys pretty much.
I want to make one more point because Bill keeps sparking these thoughts. Interior areas coming from the manufacturing into the office, coming from the work area into the office. All of those transition areas need to be matted as well. And customers don't recognize this. And oftentimes we'll take those sticky mats. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those.
Mm-hmm.
You get about 60 sheets on a mat, and they're low contact adhesives that the customer walks on, and it cleans about 90% of the soil off the bottom of their feet. You could start educating your customer as to the value and the importance of a matting program. When we have customers that refuse to buy into a matting program because they think it's too expensive, at no cost, I will put down one of these sticky mats and let them see how much soil is being tracked into their building because it sticks to those sticky mats. It doesn't take but a couple of weeks for them to recognize, okay, Bob, I get your point. We maybe need to incorporate some form of matting program here. So you can educate your customers by using those sticky mats.
Especially if you're doing some construction in the facility. This often happens too. They're going to remodel something, and they don't think about barricading that off, or negative or positive air pressure, or the tacky mats that Bob's talking about. Those are critical in those areas, because all that stuff that you didn't have in there now is getting put into the air, and then it's getting tracked out into your facility, and it just creates more work for you and damages the surfaces as well as the environment.
My gym has those sticky mats, and it's very enlightening to see what comes off on those sticky mats. And I use it, and then I even still change my shoes. And gyms, I'm sure, have a tremendous problem with all of that, getting it cleaned off.
They come out of the clean room, and those mats come out of the clean room industry. There's actually rollers that you can use on the walls in those clean room environments too, just to capture the stuff so it doesn't get onto the wall and fall onto the surface where you're working.
Well, that leads into our next topic here. There's no shortage of new tools in floor care, but which innovations or techniques are truly improving productivity in the field, and which ones look good on paper, but they're not so good in the real world use? Who would like to start here?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. There's a lot of technology coming out there. What we've seen is things, they used to be big. I used to, when I go to Vegas and watch them clean a exhibit hall, they got a riding truck mount auto scrubber that's actually a truck, and double jointed in the middle of it. And now we've gone down to small, what we call micro or nano auto scrubbers, and it'd be just a dust mop on a handle, basically, that really puts water down and sucks water up. So we've gone through the whole evolution there, and then you got the robotic equipment coming in. What couple things that I say though, I don't want to buy anything if I can't test it. If they aren't going to allow me to borrow it or to put it there for a week and test it out in real work situations, then I'm talking to the wrong salesperson. I don't care what their policy is. If I have to rent it, I'll do it. But I don't want to buy a piece of machinery and then find out that it can't see glass windows, or it's going to go down the stairs, or it's going to put too much water down, or I can't get it up. There's no elevator to get it up the second floor of my building. I mean, all these kind of things. So if you can't bring it out into the real work environment and put it into test mode for a short period of time, even if you have to pay for it, your chances of getting something that doesn't work. And salespeople, we've got to have products, we got to have equipment, but the reality is, does it work or doesn't it work in my situation? It's not what somebody tells me. It's not what the paperwork says. It's not what all these studies say. It's the bottom line. It's proofs in the pudding, just like with employees and just like products. If they work, they work. If they don't work, then I don't want them and I don't need them and I shouldn't have bought them. And I get to go to a lot of facilities where people got equipment sitting like Taft says, and it's not always that it doesn't work. It is always sometimes the employee don't want to use it because nobody's trained them, or it's just it doesn't really function well in their building. It's too big for that environment, or it's too small for that environment. Some of the most recent stuff that I really like is these. There's one out there. I won't mention any names, but there's one out there that is just the shaped and handled like a dust mop, but it puts down water and sucks up water as you go. And so you're going like this back and forth, and it's really, I think that is the end of the damp mop in the bucket. We're starting to see those things. I think maybe 5, 10 years, unless you're in an extremely soiled environment, you aren't going to see a damp mop or a dust mop around anymore. We find that vacuuming up the material, whether it's dry or wet, is going to give us a more thorough cleaning. It gets down and sucks things out rather than just wiping across the surface and spreading it around so it's not so offensive to see. And these days, we understand that a lot of the things that we can't see are more hazardous to us than the things that we can see. So we have to learn to clean with our minds and understand that the question isn't, is that blood contaminated? If it's in a facility and there's blood, we treat it as it's contaminated. And again, everything settles to the floor. There's no good stuff settling to the floor. It's all bad stuff. So when you get your hands on it and change pads and those kind of things, you should be wearing gloves and washing your hands afterwards. The floor is really dirty because gravity pulls everything down there. So, including bacteria, viruses, and everything else, that pollens, and the list goes on.
So I'll just do a little bit of twist on this one too. What basically our topic is tools and innovations.
Right.
What works versus what doesn't work. I think the battery cordless equipment was one of the best inventions because it really eliminates trying to find circuits, and it makes you mobile. And I think that's helped a lot. That's been a good innovation, but it took time for it to catch on. And then, like Bill said, the mop really has to go, our old-fashioned mop. And I think microfiber has done incredibly well to take care of that problem because mop was just moving things around. With the microfiber, you're getting a lot, but not only that, I believe the microfiber usually is made out of synthetic material, and synthetic material, petroleum-based, it likes oil, right? It's made out of oil, and it will absorb oil. So I think microfibers do a good job and a better job than your typical cotton mops because the microfiber in it, being synthetic, absorbs the oil a little better. And one of the other thing is auto scrubbers, multifunction machines, they're just kind of not good. And I'll tell you why, because someone comes out, there's a CRB example, counter rotating brush, right? They say it can do tile and grout. They say it can do carpet cleaning. They say it can do cement floor. Anything in the world it can do. But it's really primarily made for a certain task to be able to do that and do that correctly. So an example of the CRB would be in the carpet cleaning industry would be to agitate and put your pre-spray in, rather than using that for your encapsulation, where in the encapsulation area, an OP machine might work better, oscillating pad. And then robotics, robotics are huge, but not everything is going to be robotics because it can't be like the airport. We're going to run robots on a 24-hour place. I mean, it's hard. You're going to have to close sections down, which they do. And I think the robots are going to be challenging. They're going to take time. Plus, they're expensive right now. and they're not for every place. I think that's pretty much it.
One, I'll start by bouncing off of something both of them said about the microfiber mopping systems in light soil conditions. In my custodial company, we have been doing the dry soil and mopping in one step, but that can only be done in light soil conditions. But microfibers have the ability to hold that. In one microfiber mop, you could have anywhere from 60 to 200,000 microfiber filaments in 1 square inch of a mop. If you ever put those things up to your hand and they stick to your hand, that's all of those microfiber filaments grabbing your dry skin. There are different types of mops for different types of cleaning. They now have mops that have longer fibers that are maybe looped for uneven surfaces or grouted surfaces. They have really flat ones for flat surfaces. They have ones for textured surfaces, like a lot of you do LVTs and LVPs. Taff was talking about counter-rotating brushes known as cylindrical cleaning action. It goes this way. Rather, rotary goes this way. Cylindrical brush action is what a lot of the LVT flooring manufacturers are recommending. You can get those in automatic floor scrubbers, or you can get those in things like Taff's talking about, the CRBs. So each tool has its place, and you have to match the tool with the job that you are doing. There are different brushes you can use for different surfaces, so you want to make sure to match that. And then Bill said something about matching getting your employees to buy into these, and that is always kind of a challenge. When backpack vacuuming systems came out, I bought gazillions of them, right? And I go to the account and they got their vacuum from home there. Oh, I don't like wearing that thing. And so, there's a learning curve that you have to get your technicians to buy into it. And so that's always an issue. Robotics is the way of the future, battery operated, like Taft said. The Cleaning Management Institute, its very own study, says poor cord management can slow up productivity by upwards of 30%. And anytime I can use something that's battery operated, I'm going to use it. And also with new technology, your technicians feel more professional, I guess. I'm trying to find a word. Greater pride and satisfaction in their work because they're using state-of-the-art equipment. And so even things like edge cleaning tools today, we used to do all of our edges by hand, a doodlebug and a razor blade scraper. Well, now there's mechanical edge cleaning equipment that you better be taking advantage of. And anything that's battery operated, I'm all for. So that's my little ditty on, the where the industry is going.
I might just add a couple comments here. One is all the managers and supervisors trying to get them involved so that they're participating in blogs, reading the magazines, attending the ISSA show or the InterClean show in Amsterdam. When I was just mentioning to Taft there about last year when I came, or the year before, I was at the Amsterdam show, and I went to the airport to come home, and I didn't run into physically, but there was at least 5 or 10 automatic scrubbers running throughout the airport during the busy time of the day. Something we don't do here in the U.S. But over there, they were just normal. Nobody paid any attention to them. They come and they got. If somebody got in front of them, they stopped and they beeped, waited a little bit, and then they took off again. I was amazed to see them using them that way. But again, it shows that it can be done. And I think Bob is right. There's no way around this. Robotics are going to come whether we like it or not. And I think this is just the first stage. These are rudimentary robots. The next stage of these robots that you're going to see is going to be change the industry entirely. So it's very important. It's very important that we, even whatever level you're at, doing the work itself, supervising, managing your own the business, if you're not paying attention to AI, and if you're not using chat or Copilot or some other aspect of it, you're going to get left behind in the process. And they always say, "Oh, there'll always be a job for janitors." I don't see too many blacksmiths around these days. I don't see very many saddle makers around these days. I don't see very many seamstresses around these days. So, watch out. If you don't stay on top of what's going on, you maybe get left behind.
Yeah, in many cases, these robotics can actually make your company better. One of the most time-consuming tasks is dry soil removal of a facility. And when you are short custodians, you kind of do a lick and a promise, so to speak, where they might spot vacuum or just spot this or that just to get the facility to look good. With robotics, if you calculate the number of man hours a technician would spend doing dry soil removal in a hard surface in a mall, versus having that that robotic equipment doing that task, it frees those custodians up for doing something more enjoyable like cleaning toilets.
Yeah, yeah, that's optimistic, Bob. But I think you're right. You're right. They're using the robotics and the AI type stuff to see things that we can't see. I was just reading yesterday about a new program that's been picked up, and I think there was Microsoft paid more money for this program than any other program they've ever bought before, any technology. And it recognizes the face, so you don't need to talk. It can tell what you're going to say by recognizing the micro movements in your face. So again, just the technology is just amazing. For preventive maintenance, it fits in all the way. There's all kinds of stories about how analyzing the data tells us what's going to happen in the future. So it's going to come to us and take advantage of it, so we don't miss out on that. It can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing, but it's our job to make it as good as possible during this transition time.
One thing Bill said earlier about management and people in the building, I think it's important to also educate your customer. Now, the people that we deal with oftentimes is a facility manager who has numbers and they don't care what are you going to do it for me, what's the lowest possible price. I have to meet my budget. Two things in relationship to that. First of all, if you always know when their budgets are due, their capital expenditures are going to expire, I would just tell my facility guys, don't go buy a new lawnmower. Let me clean your building. Don't go get this. Let me clean your building. So sometimes these guys are looking to get rid of money so they can get the same amount of money in their budget the following year. Find out when that is. And then also sometimes they don't have the authority to make certain decisions. So there's a book out there called Selling DeVito, the very important top official. I like to educate the person above my facility guy with email blasts or little newsletters, electronic, of course, that will introduce a new piece of equipment that we're using. And so keeping them abreast of what's going on can also kind of, strengthen your relationship with your customer.
And keeping in mind that throwing money at the job is not always the answer. Before you ask for more money and put your accounts at risk, you should be looking internally to see what you can do to reduce your costs, because you control everything about your business. You don't control anything about the customer's business. So, dealing with the things that you can do things with is going to get you better results. And then it doesn't put you at, well, we're going to put it out to bid. You got to have more money every year. Our money's tight this year. So, we're under a cutting phase right now. When you hear that, that's not the time to ask for more money. That's the time to look internally and go to your customer and say, I've found some ways to save some money. Can we share it? And come up with some better ideas. And it's not always new equipment either. Your biggest cost is always your labor. So if you look at that pie first, that's where you ought to look for reductions. And just because you think your people are working, if you're managing by sitting in a chair rather than going out and walking around and spending time with your employees and going through the buildings, you don't know what's going on. If you really want to, I guarantee you, every time you go out and walk around, you'll learn something you didn't know.
Yeah, we call that tooling a building. And everything from where to plug in the vacuum cleaner. You'll have technicians that'll plug in 5 or 6 different times, when if they would have strategically plugged in, they can eliminate it and went to 2 different outlets and accomplished the same goal. You always have to tool your building to make maximum amount of time, left to right, top to bottom, these sort of things, so that you can increase productivity. And it's not about saving hours, it's about saving minutes. If I can knock off 10 minutes a week times 52 weeks, that's a lot of time. I remember in my early career, I would submit a bid and the guy would tell me, no, we gave it to somebody else. You were quite a bit more expensive, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, that guy's not going to keep that. There's no way he can do it for that price. When I realized what Bill says, no, you need to look at what you can do as a company to maximize productivity, because it's all about the labor.
Well, we have talked about so much. You've given so much advice already. But if you had to give cleaning professionals just one tip that they could do right now to improve hard floor care productivity without adding staff or increasing budgets, what would that tip be?
Educate yourself before you start the job and continue to educate yourself. You don't know it all. You got to keep learning all the time. It changes faster than you can imagine. What was real today may be changed tomorrow. It doesn't make a difference whether it's technology or your customer. So keep educating yourself and educate everybody around you, and your chances are better of success.
I couldn't agree more with Bill. Educate yourself and then figure out a way to impart that information to your custodians. We have a whole program for that. I know we won't get into that right now, but you have to make sure that your cleaning staff stays abreast as well as you. But you are the head of the ship. You are steering it. So the bucket, stops here. If I gave one tip, test every floor.
I think the most important thing would be, I'd have to agree with Bill. It'd have to be training. And then training, a checklist after that. And then accountability. I think most of the people stop at giving them a checklist, but they don't enforce and they don't have a way to hold them accountable. I think we need to do that. That's pretty much what I think would be the most important.
Well, all of those were great tips. And thank you very much to our expert panel for digging into this critical topic.